Welcome to another edition of the Packaging Europe podcast. I'm Tim Sykes, and this week our subject is the state of plastic recycling in Europe. This is a topical subject as we're just waiting for the latest statistics around plastic recycling to come out. Meanwhile, Ton Meens, the president of Plastics Recyclers Europe, has very recently warned that the European recycling industry is moving into recession. So I'm pleased to welcome Mathilde Taveau, Regulatory Affairs Manager at Plastics Recyclers Europe, to help us better understand the situation and how all of us, various types of stakeholders listening to the podcast, can contribute to progress. Mathilde, it's nice to see you again so soon after you spoke at last week's Sustainable Packaging Summit.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Tim, for the introduction and, of course, for the invite to talk today about this very important topic of the new statistics, especially for the recession of the plastic recycling industry. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. So, Mathilde, Plastics Recyclers Europe is fairly well known to the Europeans within our audience, but we do have a lot of listeners in other regions in the world. So maybe I could start by asking you to briefly introduce PRE and also to tell us what your role within Plastics Recyclers Europe encompasses.
Yes, so Plastics Recycler Europe in a nutshell is the organization that is representing the voice of the European plastics recyclers. We have one main goal, I would say, is that we are striving to make plastic circular. It includes, of course, the different parts of the value chain. We have to improve the collection. We are aiming at developing more recycling processes with promoting the use of high quality recyclates to boost the uptake of those recyclates. And the overall approach is also to ensure that design for recycling principles are applied to the different plastic articles. For this, we work with our members because we are a member-based association. We have different pillars that we are pushing forward. We are anticipating the needs of the plastic recycling industry and trying to shape regulation so that we can promote plastic recycling at EU level. We are developing some solutions to promote plastic recycling, and we are a network organization. So the idea is also, of course, to connect within the different parts of the value chain with other industry players in order to share knowledge and advance all together towards circularity. For myself, so in the company, my role is to work on regulatory affairs. I have different focus, but mainly on technical legislation. I work on chemicals legislation to ensure that the recyclates that are placed on the market are compliant with the chemical legislation. I also work a lot on food contact and different other legislation that are surrounding the plastic recycling.
Thank you. That's a great introduction. So, yes, as we've already alluded to, we are anticipating some new statistics around the recycling industry in Europe. And I believe you're prepared to give us a sort of glimpse into the picture that they paint.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are constantly working on gathering some data on the market, especially to follow the trends that are happening over the years on plastic recycling. And now we have compiled a report with the statistic for the year of 2023. So the report is not yet released, but it will be coming in the next weeks. So I definitely invite you to stay tuned to see this report. But just to give you a glimpse, like you said, Tim, what we see, unfortunately, is not necessarily a very good news, because we are seeing that the industry is actually facing a market recession. What we see is that the estimated turnover actually decreased by 12.5% compared to 2022. So this is quite a big number. And there is different factors, of course, linked to this. We have a decrease of the demand in recyclates. We have, in the meantime, an increase of the imports, and everyone knows that there is also higher production cost due to the energy crisis.
Okay. And in October, I was quite startled to see Plastics Recyclers Europe making a public intervention that's really raising concerns around the health of the circular economy in Europe, which are reflected in the statistics that you just flagged here. I'll quote just a couple of sentences from the statement that was made. And it goes as follows: the increasing lack of demand for recyclates produced in Europe, the reduced investments in domestic recycling, and the increase in imports from recyclates from outside the EU have been suffocating the European plastics industry in the last few years. These issues are feeding the existing recession on the market, driving many recycling companies out of business in 2023, with further closures happening or planned in the course of 2024. So this sounds like it's quite alarming language, and presents quite a bleak picture of plastics recycling within Europe. I wonder if we can burrow into more depth around the fundamental causes that you've alluded to and which are spoken about within there. Maybe we could start with the question about imports and how PRE sees this impacting domestic recycling.
Yeah, so indeed, the language of this quote is quite alarming, but we also believe that the situation at the moment is also quite alarming. From the number I just quoted before, you can see that there is quite an important impact on the market. If we look at one of the factors that is indeed the imports, we see that unfortunately we are striving for a level playing field, but we are not yet there. We see that there is a lot of articles that are placed in the EU market and that do not necessarily meet the EU environmental requirements. If I give you just an example, we have within the EU quite some robust legislation. We have some strict safety requirements. So don't get me wrong, this is a very good thing because we are striving for high quality material to be placed on the EU market. The problem is that those requirements are not necessarily met for imported materials. The second difficult point is that the problem is how we can verify that those articles are actually compliant with the EU legislation. So it's very important that we make sure that we have the same rules in terms of different standards that are applied so that we can also protect the material that is already produced within the plastic recycling industry within Europe.
Okay, thank you. And do you see this as an issue primarily with the implementation of rules and rather than the regulation itself? Where do you see the opportunities to address these issues?
Yeah, so I think we have definitely a lot of very good legislation that are already available. The point is, how can we strengthen their implementation and their enforcement? I think the key is at the moment there on how to implement better the legislation so we can see the effects. For example, if we talk about traceability and claims, we can think about third-party certification. This is a very good tool in order to enhance the enforcement of the legislation and to have some verifiable claims. For traceability, typically we can verify the origin of the waste by applying third-party certification. So this is definitely a help towards enforcement. We can also think about harmonization and standardization because then we can have a robust methodology towards a strict enforcement.
Okay, great. And I mean, these are desires that we would like to place on the desks of governments, EU Commission, and national governments. What about the other stakeholders who are listening to this podcast across the value chain? What kind of contribution can they make in terms of their own policies to support this picture?
Yeah. On this, so there is already, for example, third-party certification available on the market. Sometimes it's mandated by the legislation, sometimes not. But I think for material that would be imported from outside of the EU, for example, it is very important to verify the compliance with the material that is imported. Of course, I would say it's always nicer to use the material within the EU where we know that the requirements would be met. But if the material outside of the EU is used, for example, it's important to make sure that the origin of the waste can be verified, that we have sufficient traceability, that the claims that are made are actually robust, because what we see is that we also have imported recycled material, but in the end, it's kind of a fake recycled material that does not necessarily have verifiable recycled content. So all of this, it's up also to the person purchasing this type of material to ensure a verifiable claim on the material. Then we also have other points. For example, if I make a link with the food contact legislation, we have some specific requirements on the type of waste that can be processed, on the separate collection that the material needs to be collected from. All of this are parameters that could be verified by third party, but where the purchaser also needs to put an accent on.
Okay, so we have a situation where everyone is in a rush to increase the amount of PCR that's going into their packaging, driven by plastic tax, by PPWR, etc. And at the same time, perhaps need to be more mindful of the quality of the PCR or the authenticity of the PCR. And I guess that's a challenge, isn't it? When good quality material is still limited in availability and more expensive, it's going to require a certain amount of boldness on the part of businesses within the value chain to prioritize the kind of course of action that you're suggesting.
Yeah, it's true that it's a difficult situation indeed, because the targets have triggered also a demand, and the demand needs to be met. But what we can see is that currently for the EU plastic recycler, there is a lack of demand for the recyclates. So it means that there is quite an amount of recyclates in the EU market that is waiting to be used. So this is quite relevant for the purchaser of the material to look at this material to understand whether it can be used in their specific application as a material that will fulfill the EU requirements in terms of traceability, in terms of quality, in terms of the safety requirements. Of course, that is also quite a relevant point to highlight.
Yes, indeed. And that brings to mind the additional level of complexity here around food contact and other sort of sensitive applications and the rules around that. How do you see that picture unfolding?
So we have, since now 2022, a new food contact regulation for recycled plastic. This is quite a novel regulation, as the system is quite different from the previous regulation. The idea is that it really broadened the scope on which recycled plastic could achieve food contact. So before, the older regulation was very focused on PET only. Now the idea is that we have expanded the scope to other polymer, to really try to unveil the potential of those polymers like polyolefins to go toward packaging. So the idea is to have a safety assessment, but rather on the long term, so more as a monitoring of the material. And based on this, we are trying to really open the market for recycled plastic that would be other than PET to go in food contact. So this is quite a positive aspect. On the other hand, it's quite a long-term process, so it can take quite a long time before all the data is generated in order to place this material on the market. But however, we think that it has a lot of potential to have more food contact material on the market and also to try to meet the upcoming targets.
Thank you. So can I ask you what is going to be your key focus as an organization over the coming months, particularly around advocacy activities?
So of course, I would say that one of the priority is to continue raising awareness about the impact of the imports on the plastic recycling industry, but especially to focus also on the solution on how we can try to restrict this imports if the material is not compliant with the EU rules. So I think it will be one of the key topics that we will be working on. Of course, you are aware that there is many other key legislation that are in the pipeline. We can think about the PPWR. We have also the ESPR, that is quite a relevant one, the revision of the food contact framework regulation. So there is quite a couple of points that will be worked on in the next month.
Great. And aside from the lobbying part of your activities, PRE is obviously well known for running the Recyclates program. What's in store over the next year in that area?
Yeah, so the Recyclates platform was mainly focused on packaging and trying to implement the design for recycling principle based on science protocols. Now, the scope of Recyclates has extended to electronic and electrical appliances as well as vehicles, mainly because we are seeing the new end-of-life vehicle regulation. It is upcoming. So we see that we need more and more design for recycling, not only for packaging, but also for other streams that would require these benefits as well. So this is why we are expanding the scope of Recyclates and working on more protocols, but towards those streams.
So I'm going to ask a question that reflects my ignorance here. I'm someone who's been so focused on the world of packaging that I'm not really clear on the types of polymers that are used in these other applications, such as automotive and electronic goods. Are there any polymers that cross over these different end-use markets and will increased recycling of plastics used in these non-packaging applications potentially free up more PCR that can go into the packaging industry?
Yeah, so I think you touch a very good point. The complexity of those stream is definitely the variety of polymers that is used. In packaging, it's quite complex, but we are targeting polymers that are more towards PET, PES, polyolefins for ELV and WEEE, so really like those type of stream. We have a variety of polymer that are incoming in the waste stream that are received at the plastic recycling facilities. It goes for every range of material, including like performance polymer, so polymer that are quite niche in the market, which makes the difficulty on how to recycle them and the design for recycling very important in that case. Of course, there is also some overlaps between the polymers that are used I'm thinking about the polyolefins, for example, so the HDP and the PP that is used, but you will have some specificity, some fillers that will be added to have like more strength for the polymer, more impact resistance. So there is some similarities, but it remains different streams. Of course, we see that some of the upcoming regulation, notably the ELVR, will also probably include some recycled content targets in order to boost the uptake of recyclates in this stream.
Okay, yeah, so maybe we'll start to see a process of simplification of the polymers and greater harmonization of use of polymers within those other industries, similar to what we've seen over the last decade or so in packaging plastics. Okay,
Absolutely.
well, great to have a chance to learn something completely new in a conversation. So the third area where I guess I see Plastics Recyclers Europe as contributing very importantly to its field is in enabling peers within the industry to network, and your annual event is a really important touch point from that point of view. So can you let us know when that will be taking place next year and how people can get to attend it?
Yes, so every year we organize the Plastic Recycling Show Europe. It's really a fair where we have both conferences as well as exhibitor where we can really connect. So for next year, it will be in April, and the registration has just opened. So I definitely invite the audience that would be interested into plastic recycling to register for this event, because there will be quite relevant insight that will be shared. And it's also a great opportunity to connect not only within plastic recyclers, but also to extend the value chain, because we have quite a big value chain from collection to the article manufacturers. And I think it's beneficial for every one of us to really connect along this value chain.
Thank you, Mathilde. And final question, we've talked about these statistics which will be released soon. Where can our listeners find those statistics once they are published?
So the statistics report will be published on the Plastic Recycler Europe website, as well as on social media. So if you follow us on social media, then I'm sure you will see the upcoming reports pop up in your window.
Yeah, and I'm sure Packaging Europe will publish a report on that as well once we receive it. Thank you so much, Mathilde Taveau, for taking the time to talk to us today. And we'll be keeping a very close eye on this picture, which is one of the most important areas that all of us need to pay attention to when we're interested in advancing sustainability in the packaging industry. We will be back again very soon with another edition of our podcast. And for now, thanks everyone for listening. Goodbye.